"Sir, you need to leave immediately. This is a private ceremony." The security guard's voice cut through the morning air as he approached the elderly man in the worn military jacket. "I have every right to be here," Frank Morrison replied, his weathered hands gripping the invitation tighter. "My grandson is graduating today." The guard shook his head firmly. "Orders from the principal. You're not welcome on school property. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where we uncover the extraordinary moments that remind us why gratitude and respect should never be forgotten. Today's story will challenge everything you think you know about honor, sacrifice, and the power of standing up for what's right. Sometimes the most unexpected heroes emerge from the shadows of our past to teach us lessons we desperately need to learn. Let's uncover what really happened on that graduation day that changed everything for one small town and reminded an entire community about the true meaning of service and sacrifice. Frank Morrison had seen more than his share of battles. 30 years in the Navy, including 2 tours in Vietnam and countless missions that remained classified to this day. He'd earned his stripes the hard way, through blood, sweat, and an unwavering commitment to protecting the freedoms others took for granted. But none of that seemed to matter to Principal Janet Whitmore, who had made it clear that Frank's presence was unwelcome at Lincoln High School. The conflict began 3 weeks earlier when Frank attended a school board meeting. The district was facing budget cuts, and military history programs were first on the chopping block. Frank stood up during public comment, his voice steady despite his age. "These kids need to understand their history," he said. "They need to know the price of freedom." His words were met with polite applause, but Principal Whitmore's expression remained cold. "Mr. Morrison," she said after the meeting, "we appreciate your service, but times have changed. We're focusing on more relevant subjects now." Her dismissive tone struck Frank like a physical blow. He'd heard it before, this subtle suggestion that his generation's sacrifices were somehow outdated, irrelevant to modern students. The situation escalated when Frank volunteered to speak at the school's Veterans Day assembly. Principal Whitmore declined, citing scheduling conflicts. When Frank offered to donate his collection of military artifacts to the school museum, she responded with a form letter about inappropriate materials. Each rejection felt like another door slamming shut on the lessons he desperately wanted to share. The final straw came when Frank's grandson Marcus told him about the graduation ceremony. "Grandpa, I really want you there," the 18-year-old said. "You've been my hero my whole life." Frank's chest swelled with pride. Marcus was headed to the Naval Academy, following in his grandfather's footsteps. This graduation wasn't just a milestone, it was a passing of the torch. But when Frank arrived at the school that morning, dressed in his military jacket adorned with ribbons and medals earned through decades of service, he was met with hostility instead of welcome. The security guard, a young man who looked barely older than the graduating students, stood between Frank and the auditorium doors like an immovable wall. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," the guard repeated, his hand moving to his radio. "This is your final warning." Frank looked past him, seeing families streaming into the building, all of them welcomed with smiles and programs. All except him. "What's the problem here?" Frank asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "I have an invitation. My grandson is graduating today." He held up the card Marcus had given him, printed with the school's official seal. The guard glanced at the invitation, but shook his head. "Principal Whitmore was very specific. You're not allowed on school property. She says you've been harassing the staff." The accusation hit Frank like a slap. Harassing. He'd done nothing but try to contribute, to share his knowledge and experience with young people who needed to understand their heritage. "I've never harassed anyone," Frank said quietly. "I've only tried to help." But the guard wasn't listening. He was already speaking into his radio, calling for backup. Frank felt the weight of every stare, every whispered comment from the families walking past. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, but none stopped to help. Marcus appeared at the auditorium doors, his graduation cap slightly askew. "Grandpa, you made it!" His face fell when he saw the confrontation. "What's going on?" The guard stepped forward, his posture aggressive. "Your grandfather needs to leave. He's not welcome here." "What? That's crazy!" Marcus's voice cracked with indignation. "He's my family. He's a war hero." The guard's expression didn't change. "I don't care if he's George Washington. He's not coming in." Frank placed a gentle hand on his grandson's shoulder. "It's okay, son. You go enjoy your day. This is your moment." But Marcus shook his head, tears forming in his eyes. "No, Grandpa, this isn't right. You deserve to be here more than anyone." He turned to the guard. "Do you know who this man is? Do you know what he's done for this country?" The guard's radio crackled, and he spoke into it again. "We need additional security at the main entrance, now." Frank felt the familiar weight of being outnumbered, outgunned, but not outmatched. He'd faced worse odds in jungles and deserts, but this felt different. This felt personal. "Marcus, go inside," he said firmly. "Your classmates need you. Your future needs you." But as he turned to walk away, something extraordinary happened. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot, its windows tinted dark. Then another, and another. Car doors slammed in perfect unison, and men in dress uniforms emerged. Navy SEALs, their ribbons and medals gleaming in the morning sun. They moved with the precision of a military unit, their bearing unmistakably that of elite warriors. The lead SEAL approached Frank, his face breaking into a smile of recognition. "Master Chief Morrison," he said, snapping to attention and rendering a crisp salute. "Lieutenant Commander James Rodriguez, SEAL Team 6. We got word you might need some backup." Frank's eyes widened. He recognized the name, remembered the young sailor he'd mentored years ago. "Rodriguez, Jimmy Rodriguez from San Diego." Frank's voice cracked with emotion. "Master Chief, you changed my life. When I was ready to wash out of training, you pulled me aside and told me something I've never forgotten. You said, 'Son, being a SEAL isn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about never giving up, no matter what.' Those words got me through every mission, every deployment." The other SEALs formed a respectful circle around Frank, their presence commanding immediate attention. Students, parents, and faculty members stopped to stare. The security guard's radio chatter ceased. Even Principal Whitmore emerged from the building, her face pale as she took in the scene. "What's the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice lacking its usual authority. Commander Rodriguez turned to face her, his expression polite but firm. "Ma'am, we're here to ensure that Master Chief Morrison receives the respect he's earned. This man trained half of us, saved the lives of the other half. He's not missing his grandson's graduation." Principal Whitmore's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "This is private property. You can't just—" Her words trailed off as more SEALs emerged from the vehicles. These weren't just any servicemen. Their ribbons told stories of valor, sacrifice, and heroism that commanded respect from anyone who understood their meaning. "Ma'am," Rodriguez continued, his voice respectful but unwavering, "Master Chief Morrison has given more to this country than most people can imagine. He's earned the right to celebrate his grandson's achievement. We're here to make sure that happens." The crowd that had gathered began to murmur their agreement. Parents nodded approvingly, students whispered excitedly, and several faculty members looked embarrassed by their principal's behavior. Frank felt overwhelmed by the show of support. These men had traveled from across the country, abandoning their own plans and responsibilities, just to stand with him. "You didn't have to do this," he whispered to Rodriguez. "Yes, sir, we did," came the reply. "You taught us that we never leave a man behind. That includes you." Principal Whitmore realized she was outnumbered and outclassed. The local news crews were already arriving, drawn by reports of the unusual gathering. The last thing she needed was negative publicity about barring a war veteran from his grandson's graduation. "Perhaps we can work something out," she said weakly. But Rodriguez wasn't finished. "Ma'am, with respect, there's nothing to work out. Master Chief Morrison has an invitation to this ceremony. He's going to attend, and he's going to do so with the honor and dignity he's earned. The principal nodded quickly, her defiance crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny and moral authority. The SEALs escorted Frank into the auditorium, their formation creating a corridor of honor. Every eye in the building turned to watch this procession of heroes. Frank's military jacket, which had seemed so out of place in the parking lot, now appeared exactly where it belonged, among these men who understood sacrifice. As they found seats in the front row, Rodriguez leaned over to Frank. "Master Chief, there's something else. We've been in touch with the Pentagon. They're recommending you for the Navy Distinguished Service Medal. Your decades of training young sailors, your mentorship, your dedication to service even after retirement, it's all been documented." Frank's eyes filled with tears. After all these years, after all the dismissals and rejections, his service was finally being recognized. But more than that, his teachings had created a legacy that extended far beyond anything he could have imagined. The graduation ceremony proceeded with unprecedented energy. When Marcus's name was called, the applause was thunderous. But when he reached the podium to accept his diploma, he did something unexpected. He paused, looked directly at his grandfather, and saluted. The entire auditorium erupted in cheers. During the valedictorian speech, the student speaker departed from her prepared remarks. "Today, we've learned something important about respect and honor," she said. "We've learned that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear military jackets covered in ribbons earned through service and sacrifice. Today, we're proud to graduate in the presence of Master Chief Frank Morrison and the Navy SEALs who came to honor him." The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. Parents wiped away tears, students cheered, and even Principal Whitmore applauded, though her face remained flushed with embarrassment. Frank sat surrounded by his brothers in arms, feeling a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years. After the ceremony, families gathered for photos and celebration. The SEALs posed with graduating students, sharing stories of service and inspiring young people to consider military careers. Frank found himself at the center of it all, no longer the unwelcome outsider but the guest of honor. Marcus approached with his diploma, his face glowing with pride. "Grandpa, I'm sorry about what happened earlier. I'm sorry they treated you that way." Frank pulled his grandson into a fierce hug. "Son, you have nothing to apologize for. Today taught us both something important about standing up for what's right." Commander Rodriguez gathered the SEALs for a final moment with Frank. "Master Chief, we want you to know that everything we've accomplished, every life we've saved, every mission we've completed successfully, it all traces back to the lessons you taught us. You didn't just train sailors. You shaped warriors, leaders, and men of character." As the crowd began to disperse, Principal Whitmore approached Frank hesitantly. "Mr. Morrison, I owe you an apology. I was wrong to treat you the way I did. I let bureaucracy and politics cloud my judgment. I forgot that education isn't just about textbooks and test scores. It's about learning from people like you who have real wisdom to share." Frank extended his hand to her. "Principal Whitmore, we all make mistakes. What matters is how we learn from them. I'd still like to share my stories with your students, if you'll have me." She shook his hand gratefully. "Mr. Morrison, I would be honored to have you speak to our students. In fact, I'd like to establish a permanent veterans education program in your honor." As the sun set over the school parking lot, Frank stood surrounded by his fellow veterans, his grandson, and a community that had finally learned to appreciate the sacrifices made on their behalf. The SEALs prepared to return to their duties, but not before one final salute to the man who had helped shape them into the warriors they'd become. "Master Chief," Rodriguez said, "we'll never forget what you taught us, and we'll make sure future generations don't forget either." Frank nodded, his heart full. "That's all I ever wanted, son. To make sure the lessons of service, sacrifice, and honor are never forgotten." The story of Frank Morrison's graduation day spread far beyond that small town. News outlets picked up the story. Social media buzzed with praise for the SEALs who honored their mentor, and communities across the country began to examine how they treated their own veterans. Frank received hundreds of letters from people thanking him for his service and apologizing for a society that too often forgets its heroes. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was the change in Marcus. Inspired by his grandfather's dignity in the face of rejection and the loyalty shown by his fellow veterans, Marcus entered the Naval Academy with a deeper understanding of what service truly means. He carried with him not just the knowledge from textbooks, but the wisdom that comes from watching honor in action. Today, Frank Morrison serves as the coordinator of the Veterans Education Program at Lincoln High School. Every semester, he shares his stories with new students, teaching them about courage, sacrifice, and the importance of standing up for what's right. The military artifacts he once offered to donate now form the centerpiece of a museum dedicated to honoring local veterans. The lesson of this story extends far beyond one man's struggle for recognition. It reminds us that respect isn't something to be earned only by the young or the currently powerful. It belongs to those who have served, who have sacrificed, and who continue to contribute to their communities long after their official duties have ended. In our rush toward the future, we sometimes forget to honor the past. We dismiss the wisdom of previous generations, assuming their experiences are irrelevant to our modern world. But true wisdom is timeless, and the lessons learned through service and sacrifice remain as valuable today as they were generations ago. Frank Morrison's story teaches us that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. It shows us that loyalty and brotherhood forged through shared service create bonds that last a lifetime. Most importantly, it reminds us that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, especially those who have given so much to protect the freedoms we enjoy. The next time you see a veteran, remember Frank Morrison. Remember that beneath those ribbons and medals lies a lifetime of service, sacrifice, and wisdom. Remember that respect isn't just something we give to the powerful or the famous. It's something we owe to those who have earned it through their dedication to something greater than themselves. And remember that sometimes the greatest victories come not from changing minds through force, but from standing firm in your convictions and allowing your character to speak for itself. Frank Morrison didn't need to fight for his place at that graduation. He simply needed to be who he was and let others recognize the honor in that.